And is it actually recording? There we go. That is one thing. So I do try my very best to record every lecture. I can be a tiny bit forgetful. So if you, usually I'll ramble about it. I'll be like, let's start the recording. So if you don't hear me start the recording, yell at me in chat to start the recording. If I ever forget, I usually try to give some alternate video. I have another class that meets right before this one that will most likely be covering the same exact material. So I might just give you their recording. I might go out of my way just to specifically record the stuff again, because I do expect you guys to be able to have the recordings. It's just sometimes I can forget. How early do they post after class? It can depend. It can depend how busy I am that day. It can depend on how long it takes the videos to compile. I try to get them up as soon as possible and by the end of the day, hopefully, definitely. But sometimes it could take maybe until the next morning. So I try to get them up as soon as possible, but it can kind of depend on the day. Let me do something really quick. Let me reshare my screen.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I got an email this morning saying that I'm now in Professor Huggins' class, but it still has me in this class as well, so I'm not sure where exactly I'm supposed to be.
Ooh, that's fun. 1 second.
And he never sent out an email for the Zoom link. He said we were supposed to meet on Zoom this morning, but he never sent that out.
Oh, Tracy.
So I have no idea.
I don't see you on my list.
Okay.
Which would therefore make me assume you're in Professor Huggins. There was unbeknownst to me by the time I sent you that original email, essentially right after I sent that original email, there was a change in sections that I did not know was going to happen. And a chunk of the people who were in this class got moved over to that one. Don't know why it happened. I have no control over it. But it does seem like you're in Professor Huggins' class because you're not on my list. I know Tracy is in the hospital right now, so that could potentially be why they didn't get the link out to you guys. If you wanted to chill here to just get some information about the first kind of, but although I should say their class is going to be different than mine. So if you want to stick around to get the first bit of notes in, feel free, but of course you're technically not in this class, so that wouldn't make sense either. It's an unfortunate situation that I don't know why it happened. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna start rambling about the same thing over and over again.
That also happened to me, so I was wondering if I was in this class or the other class too.
I thought I removed all y'all that got changed out. Ferris.
Oh, he just sent out the Zoom link. I just got the notification.
Ferris, I don't see you either.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. All right. I thought I removed those people from. Oh well, I'll have to do that later. Okay, so hopefully, all y'all are supposed to be with me. I think most of you whose names I see in my thing right now are on my list. Okay. What was I saying? I think I was just rambling because we were waiting and now it's been enough time, so we could probably jump in now. So again, I'm Erin Hannah. I'm hopefully your instructor. The tiniest bit about me, because I know we don't really care. I'm originally from New Jersey, South Jersey, about like 40 minutes from AC and Wildwood, if you're familiar with the area, kind of like smack dab in the middle of the South Jersey. But anyway, and now I'm here, got my master's from USC, and here we are. I know there's like a strange amount of people from New Jersey around here. So whenever I say that, people are always like, no way. But anyway. So let me triple check that I'm not getting any panicked emails about people not being able to get in. Nope. Okay, cool. So the syllabus should be up on the screen. If you can't see it, Teams does this weird thing sometimes where if you come in too late, it doesn't show my screen. So if there's ever a time where you pop in and you don't see a shared screen, because usually if I'm in the call, my screen is shared, just like in the chat, say, hey, reshare your screen, please, because it's super easy to fix. But okay, so most of this stuff, the most pertinent stuff, I should say, is kind of on Blackboard already. If you go on Blackboard under the syllabus and schedule, there is the full syllabus there, but some of the more probably information that you're going to care about throughout the semester is kind of listed underneath of it as well. My office hour information, the textbook material, my makeup policy, and the list of your exam dates. But so we're just going to go over kind of the most important pieces of this. So my email, ephannah@math.sc.edu. In terms of emailing me, if you have just a generic question, you can just send an email. But if it's a question about like a homework problem or a grade, if you could potentially put in the section number or the time frame if you forget the section number, because I have 2 back-to-back classes for 122. So it can get a little bit like, wait, which class are you in? Which one am I looking in? So if you send me an email, if you could say, hey, I'm in section 31, or you could say I'm in the 12 o'clock one, I'll know which one you're talking about. In terms of emailing me, I'm usually pretty good at responding. If you don't hear back from me in like 24 business hours specifically, so weekends get a little iffy, but if you don't hear back from me in usually around 24 business hours, email me again. Because I've actually had some issues with Outlook lately. I just received an email this morning that is obviously from a student last semester about homework that was in like the middle of the semester, and it just randomly never got to me until today. So if you emailed me and I'm not answering you, email me again, because either I missed it or Outlook's being stupid or something like that. My office is technically in LeConte, 300D. I won't usually be there, but if you do want to set up a time to meet me in person, that's where we would do so. Otherwise, office hours will most likely be online. It's going to be through Teams, but not in this team because I have the multiple classes and I need to hold office hours for all of them at the same time. So if you're on Teams and you go to the little Teams tab, there's like a thing in the top corner that says join, and you'd use this code right here to join into my office hours team. So my office hours are Tuesday, Thursday from 10 to 11, and Monday, Wednesday from 1:30 to 3:30. If none of those times work for you, or you just want to meet on a Friday, say 1:30 to 3:30, we can also do appointments. So as long as I'm not teaching, I will most likely be able to meet with you. If you would like to meet me in person, even during these set times, let me know, maybe a day in advance. If you're going to say, hey, I'd really like to come to your office hours tomorrow, can I come in person? I will most likely say sure. And then I would go to my office the next day and make sure I'm there for you. So I can do in person, but that you need to let me know that you want that in advance. Otherwise, I'll just be online. Yeah, so no one really cares about all this hoopla. Your materials, so I sent an email out about a week ago. So if you've just joined the class, you might not have seen it, but it is in the announcements on Blackboard. I'm doing a bit of an experimental setup this semester. So the usual textbook that we would use is called Applied Calculus by Hughes Hallett. If you want a copy of this, you can usually find a pretty cheap one online, a used copy. So you don't need a new copy. You don't need to get it from the bookstore or anything like that. And usually that comes with Wiley Plus access. You do not need Wiley Plus access, okay? So you would just, if you want to get a copy of the book, I would just suggest a used copy off of Amazon or something. Otherwise, there's an alternative textbook, which isn't exactly the same, but covers all of the same, well, a large majority of the same material. It's going to cover everything that we're going to cover. And that's free, open resource online. So that's at this link if you want to just use that. Otherwise, I do post kind of guided note stuff, so I feel like most of the time people don't even really use the book for my class. But if you want one, those are your 2 options. You are going to need online access to something called WebWork. WebWork is free. Also, I don't have all of the information for it yet, so you can't set up your WebWork yet. Hopefully by Wednesday I'll have that out to you. So the instructions for doing that will be on Blackboard. They're not there yet because, again, it's not quite fully set up yet, but that'll be set up hopefully by the end of the week, and that's where you'll be doing your homework. So again, it's free. It looks a little more bare bone than some of the other online homework systems if you're used to them, but it's a pretty good platform. The math department already uses it for 141, Calculus 1 and Calculus 2, not for homework, but they use it for a different format. Anyway, so I'll get you information on that as soon as I can. Once I get it fully set up, we'll probably spend that next class session a little bit of time going over what it looks like and how to find things. So that'll probably be on Wednesday, maybe Friday at the latest. Essentially everything else that you would ever need is going to be on Blackboard. All of my blank notes, all of the filled out notes, all of the lecture recordings. Essentially, if you think you should find something, it'll be on Blackboard. There are blank copies of some of the first lecture notes already up. It's under the course content / module tab. And they're essentially going to appear in the order that we go through them. So they're not numbered or anything because of the difference between the two books. But actually, let me point this out real quick. Here. So under the course content and modules, so this would be the first set of notes we're using, then linear functions would be the second, then average rate of change, and so on and so forth. I'm going to try to get these up, a few days before we would actually go through them, so you have time to print them out if you want, or whatever floats your boat. So there'll be blank copies, and once we do the completed notes, it'll also pop up in this same section. It'll just have a separate little link to the filled out copy. And it also tells you what sections in each one of the books it's for. So the Hughes Hallett is the one that you would get a paper copy for, and the Callaway is the online one. So sometimes, notice in the second one, it's 1.2 versus 1.3. Sometimes the sections don't match up, but it'll tell you which sections from each book that set of notes is for. All right, back over here. A calculator. Technically, in terms of the department syllabus for this, it says required. About 95% of the questions I ever use can be done by hand. It might take a little longer, but you don't necessarily need a calculator. There are a few that it's technically required for. Now, if you don't have a handheld calculator, I'm sorry, I'm not used to talking this much anymore. If you don't have a handheld calculator, since this is a 100% online class, I'm going to allow you to use Desmos. Now, Desmos is just a web page. It's got a scientific calculator, it's got a graphing calculator, it's got a bunch of other stuff, but those are the main two things you'd use it for: scientific calculator and graphing calculator. So if you don't have a handheld one, you will be able to use that even on quizzes and exams. So Desmos.com, if you don't have a calculator, has both scientific and graphing calculator capabilities. I'll try to, every once in a while, note how to use Desmos. It's pretty user-friendly. Even the graphing calculator, you usually just type in the function you want to look at and kind of points out all the interesting points. And even when we get to the calculus material, Desmos can still handle that. So there's that. I expect you to be here. It's a math class. It kind of builds upon itself. If you start missing classes, you might get behind. Don't cheat. If you do, you'll get a 0 on whatever that is. Disabilities. If you have a disability and you require extra time or anything like that, it must be through the Office of Student Disability Services. So if you aren't signed up with them already, you need to be. Because if you just come to me and say, hey, I need more time on my exam, I can't give it to you unless it's officially through the Office of Student Disability Services. So you can go into them. They're in closed HIP if you're by campus, or if you just Google University of South Carolina Students with Disabilities, I'm sure you can find their email or their phone number. But once you get set up with them, everything else will be just pushed through Blackboard. So all of our quizzes and exams will be on Blackboard. So I'll just push through any extra time on there manually. hey, this is a class, you got to study for it. Imagine that. Late policies. So homework will be accepted late. Any points that are earned within 7 days of the due date, it's going to receive a 25% penalty. And then after that, it'll be a 50% penalty. So you can even, you can do the first homework assignment at the very end of the semester, but it'll just be at a 50% penalty. Just to clarify that, the penalty is only on points you have not earned yet. So say you did half of the homework assignment and then just forgot to do the second half, and then you did the second half late. It's only the late half that receives the penalty. So say you had 20 points already earned and then there were 20 points otherwise. If it was the 50% penalty, you would still keep the 20 points from the original thing that you had done, and then you would get 10 points from the late piece. So if you've done any of the work before the due date, those points stay. It's your responsibility to let me know if you've done stuff late and your grade has changed. There's lots of you and one of me, and so it's hard to keep track of who's done what late, when, why, and how, and if it's done. So if you're ever doing something late and you get it done, just shoot me an email. Hey, I finally finished this one. Can you update my grade on this? And that's how that'll go. Makeup policy for quizzes. You essentially have until the next quiz to reach out to me and let me know that you need to do a makeup. So all of the quizzes are on Wednesdays. So say you miss Wednesday's quiz, you have until Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. of the next week to reach out and say, hey, I missed Wednesday's quiz. Can I make it up? After that, if the 7 days have passed, it's just kind of so sorry, not sorry. So if you miss a quiz, let me know ASAP. And just seriously, essentially every Wednesday where there's not an exam, you have a quiz. So if you missed a Wednesday, you probably missed a quiz. Exams should really only be made up in emergency situations, but if there's something that comes up with an exam, just let me know ASAP and we'll work something out. It's a synchronous class. Homework's going to be through WebWork. Essentially what'll happen is it'll be like a Monday to Monday type of thing. It'll go up on a Monday and it'll be due the next Monday at 11:59 p.m. You won't have one this week. Again, this week is kind of going to be the setup. Once I get that set up, I'll let you know. Quizzes every Wednesday. They'll happen during like the last 10 to 15 minutes of class. So on Wednesdays, we'll do lecture, and then towards the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll jump on Blackboard. The quizzes will be on Blackboard during the last 10 to 15 minutes. Exams are these dates. Again, these are listed kind of separately on Blackboard if you ever need to go find them super quick. So one of them is on a Friday. Otherwise, everything else is going to be on Wednesdays, well, besides your final. So you've got February 10th, March 19th, and April 14th, and then Monday, May 3rd, is your final. We'll, of course, talk about that as we get there. We're not there yet. Here's how the breakdown's going to go. And I use pretty much I feel like this is the, generic grading scale that most people use. Excuse me. Websites, Blackboard, of course. Wolfram Alpha is another good one besides Desmos. Desmos is a bit more user-friendly, but Wolfram Alpha is a bit more, it can do a lot more stuff. So if you also don't have a calculator, Wolfram Alpha is also a decent thing. I would suggest Desmos if you want a more user-friendly situation, but Wolfram Alpha is there as well. If you need support throughout the semester, of course, come to me in my office hours, please. I'm not a terrifying human being. I want to help you. There's also free tutoring through the math department. You can follow that link. It hasn't been updated for this semester yet, but I believe they will most likely be doing the same thing as last semester, where it's online. It's a drop-in type thing. So it's on Blackboard Collaborate if they're doing the same thing as last semester, where you essentially just pop in and say, hey, I have some questions on these homework assignments or on this quiz that I just got back or something like that. So if you bring them questions, they'll answer them for you or work them through with you. It's first come, first serve as well. So if you drop in and there's like a ton of people there, it might take a while for them to get to you, but it's a drop in, come as you will kind of tutoring deal. Sorry, one second. So sorry. There's also the Student Success Center. They have free one-on-one, and also I believe they have the group tutoring as well. Also, We have an SI. Not to put you on the spot, Peyton, but did you want to say something real quick, or?
Sure, I can. Hey everyone, my name's Peyton. I'm going to be your SI leader for the semester. I will be holding, I think, 3 sessions a week. We haven't gotten our schedules for those yet, but I'll send everyone an email when we do. Usually I hold those on Blackboard Collaborate. So I'm assuming you've used that last semester, but you'll just go to the Blackboard Collaborate page and then I'll have the sessions labeled with whatever date they're being held on. So yeah, and we can go over homework. I'll plan practice problems, reviews of what we went over in class, and stuff like that.
Great. I will also update the syllabus with her email, and I'll post that. I'll update that later today. I'll probably put her information kind of like I did mine with the office hours. I'll put her email in a kind of separate thing so you can find it super easily. But she's our SI. If you haven't experienced SIs before, I think most of you probably maybe have in other classes, but it's just, she's there to help you. She's taken this class before, not specifically with me, but she's taken this class before. You can also go to any SI sessions you want. You can easily find any SI schedule if I usually just Google University of South Carolina SI. It usually pops up pretty quickly. I'll also put up on Blackboard when I put up her information. For my other class, I have a different SI. So I'll put up her information in case her schedule matches better for you than Peyton's does. It's completely up to you. You can go to whoever you want. You don't have to go to anyone, but if you want to, that's there. Some important dates if you feel like you need to drop, hopefully not. And then our tentative schedule. The one thing I'll say about this in case you use it is since I'm trying out that free book option, again, I think I already mentioned this, that their sections don't necessarily match up. So this is also a way to try to keep track of which one you want to look at. So this one's the usual, the paper one, if you want to order one, and then the Callaway is the online one. So just keep track of that. I think that's it for the syllabus. Are there any questions so far? Cool. Oh, wait. Okay, cool. I think what I want to do now then is I want to pop over here real quick. This is going to be trippy. Oh, that didn't work. That didn't work. That's why. Hello. You're going to be awkwardly shared for a second. So just on Teams, just to give you guys an idea, if you now yours might look different if you're in the web browser, but there should be this little conversation tab where you can pop out the chat if you need to. There's this little raise hand function. You don't have to use it, but say I'm like really going and I'm just rambling and you're trying to type a question and I'm going about 5 miles an hour, that would be a good way to make me stop. So if I see that little hand pop up, I'll stop and make sure I can answer your question and wait for you to type it in chat. Or if you want to put that on, so I'll stop talking and then you can pop in on voice. The other thing, if you see these 3 little dots, I don't believe you can do this on the web browser, but if you download the app, you should be able to turn on live captions. This will just turn them on for you, but if you have hearing issues or just like to have captions, you can do that. They're not perfect by any means, and sometimes they are really silly, but if you think those would be helpful, you can do that. I think that's most of the things you'd need to know on Teams. So, what is it, 12:26? We end at 12:50, so we've got about 25 more minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off on just a little bit of notes. We won't get too far. And again, especially today, because I don't know if anyone was able to get these done already. If I'm going too fast at any time, and not just today, if there's any time that I'm going too fast, I scrolled down and you weren't done writing something, please just tell me to slow down or to scroll back up or whatever. One thing about me and about my teaching style is A, I ramble a lot, and B, it's been a very long time since I had to learn this material, guys. This material comes easy to me at this point in my life. I've been doing it for way too long. And to me, a lot of this stuff is easy. And I'm not trying to say that in a condescending way at all. What I mean by saying that is if I'm ever going through something and I'm like, oh yeah, and then obviously you do this, but it wasn't obvious to you and you don't know why I did it, please don't feel like, oh crap, she said it was obvious and I didn't get it. So obviously I'm like failing at life. No. I'm a little too awkward for my own good. So sometimes things just spew out of my mouth before I think about it. So I try to avoid, saying things are easy or obvious or anything like that. But if there's anything where I've gone through something, you're like, yo, I have no idea how she got that. Please, for the love of all that is good and holy, don't be afraid to stop me. I'm here to try to help you. So if you're not understanding it, I'm sure someone else would love for you to ask the question because maybe they're like, oh, I don't want to ask. So please, for the love of all that is good and holy, stop me if you need to stop me. Because I've been doing this stuff so long and it's like breathing. Anyway, so our first section is about functions. So a function, let me make sure this isn't going to be, yep, good. So a function is a rule that takes certain inputs and assigns to them a definite or unique output. So I'll write that kind of in one more way. Every input has only one output. And this too, sometimes, if this was an in-person class, I would wait until everyone was stopped scribbling before I would move on, which is obviously not something I can do because I don't see you scribbling. So again, if I start moving too fast, sometimes I forget that you aren't writing as fast as I am. So feel free to stop me. So every input only has one output. And the set of inputs is going to be called the domain. Oh, I meant to say something else. I'll say it in a second. And the set of outputs is going to be called the range. One more thing I meant to say about this class. This first chapter is a bit odd because it shoves not only does it shove a lot of material in a short amount of time, but depending on where you are mathematically, it might seem like a lot of review or it might just be a really great refresher. So if you've taken calculus before, this first section is going to seem like a lot of review because it goes all the way back to linear functions in algebra and then gets up through some pre-calculus stuff. If you haven't had math in a while, it might just be a good refresher, but it will move pretty quickly. So this first chapter is a little weird. And then once we get to chapter 2, that's when we actually get to the calculus. All right. So those are our definitions of function and then domain and range. One thing I want to say, let me kind of make a side note over here, is a relation. Ooh, that's thick. Is that a relation is essentially any set of data. So if I give you a set of data, it's a relation. So essentially every function is a relation, but not every relation is a function. So if you hear me say relation, that's essentially what I mean. Essentially any set of data that I could give you. It's essentially like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. All functions are relations, but not all relations are functions. So say I want to give an example of a function that we could potentially encounter in everyday life, and I want to figure out what the input and the output are. So I'm going to give 2 examples. Of course, there's like infinitely many examples of functions you can encounter. But 2 I'm going to do is I'm going to say if we talk about rainfall, let me say per month. So essentially the rainfall is going to be the output and the month is going to be the input. You're going to tell me input. Yeah. Oh, the other thing is I'm terrible at spelling. So if I spell something wrong, You can tell me if you want, or you can just laugh at me. So input is month, output is rainfall. Essentially, you say the month is May, and I say the rainfall was 10 centimeters. So this makes sense that this is a function because if you're, say we're restricting to just one singular year, if you say the month of May, I can't tell you that it rained 2 different amounts in the month of May. If we're, restricting it to a singular year, a singular place, it can't have rained both 10 centimeters that month and 20 centimeters that month. That doesn't make any sense. So each input, each month can only have one amount of rainfall. So that's why that would be considered a function. Another one that might be a bit more everyday would be, say, distance traveled by a car. And that traveled, I don't know if that has 1 L or 2. And in my other class, I put 1, and here I have 2. I don't know. I can't spell. Distance traveled by a car for time traveled in, whoops. My laptop is angry. One moment. Whoop. Whoop. Very angry, apparently. There we go. Distance traveled by a car for time traveled in hours. I'm going to need to look up how to spell traveled later. So essentially the distance is going to be the output. And the essentially time traveled in hours is going to be the input. So again, this makes sense that this is a function, because if I say that I drove for 2 hours, I couldn't have driven, 100 miles and 200 miles at the same time. That doesn't make any sense. So for each input, each hour, there's only going to be one set distance. Now, what if I wanted to think of something that wasn't a function? So if I want to think of something that isn't a function, say I take, for example, and again, there's infinitely many examples of these, but what I'm going to say is, let's compare the grades on an exam to the time spent studying. So we're going to take the inputs to be the grade on the exam and the outputs to be the time spent studying. Now here, the reason this becomes not a function is essentially because, say we look at 2 people have an 85 on the exam. So we have an input for 2 different people of an 85. Let's say that the one person studied for 2 hours and the other studied for just 1 hour. So essentially you have the input of 85, and it goes to 2 hours for one person and 1 hour for a different person, but it's the same input of 85. So since we have this one input of 85 going to 2 different outputs, that would no longer be a function. So if you have one input going to multiple outputs, that's not good. One thing I want to say is, if we were to switch this around, say we compared time studying to the grade, and so it was 2 hours gave you an 85 and in 1 hour gave the other person an 85. So essentially 2 inputs to the same output. So let me try to put this off to the side. I got a little window in my way. There we go. So 2 inputs to the same output. Is okay, even for a function. So if 2 different inputs go to the same output, that's fine. It's just that we can't have the same input going to different outputs. Okay. All right. I also try to only scroll down to keep this last thing inside, but again, stop me if you need to. And I got to keep track of time because I'm not used to it yet. 12:50, okay. So say now we want to determine the input and output for the following statement. The average height in inches, which we're going to call H, of a young peach tree in South Carolina in a given year is a function of R, inches of cumulative rainfall since March 1st. So the big piece that we want to talk about here is essentially something called function notation. It's a function notation you've probably seen a ton in your mathematical lives. It's usually f of x equals y. So this is called function notation, where essentially that f is the name of the function. Your x are your inputs, and your y are your outputs. Now, the main thing we want to take from this question is actually the phrasing, because since we want to actually figure out the inputs and outputs, and we're just essentially given a statement, there's a phrase in there that is actually going to tell us exactly which ones are the inputs and the outputs, with a little bit of work. But what that phrasing is essentially, if I were to look at this f of x equals y, I would read that as y is a function of x. You want to be very familiar with that phrasing, okay? Now, the nice thing about this phrasing is it kind of just writes itself out if you read it. So we essentially have y, which gives you y, is would give you an equal sign. The word function would tell you to put an f and then x. So essentially the phrasing lays out the format. So if y is a function of x, y equals f of x. So the thing here that's going to help us figure out which one's the input and which one's the output is we're told that h is a function of r. There's a lot of filler language in there, but the main thing is that h is a function of r. So let me just pull that out. H is a function of r. So h equals f of r. H is a function of r. And now that we have that layout, since we know the thing inside of the parentheses next to the function name is the inputs and the thing on the other side of the equal sign is the outputs, we know that the inputs are going to be R. So the cumulative rainfall, it's right there. And then the outputs, it's going to be H, which was the height. So the main thing to pull from that problem is this phrasing. Y is a function of X, H is a function of R. You're going to want to be very familiar with that notation because we'll find questions along the way, especially once we get to our cost, revenue, and profit stuff. It'll say stuff like cost function is a function of, cost is a function of price, or revenue is a function of quantity. And it's going to essentially tell you how to set it up, which ones act as your X's, which ones act as your Y's. Questions, concerns on that? Alrighty. So I'll wait like another couple seconds in case people are still writing stuff down. And I think we'll go through 2 more and then we'll call it a day. So I do need to scroll down a little more past this one, so maybe I'll wait a couple more seconds. It's the one thing I hate about one of the many things I don't like about teaching online is I never know if people are done writing stuff down or not. But here we go. So say I have this table and I want to fill in these blanks, so I'm essentially using the function notation to kind of denote whether I want the input or the output. So for these first two, for A and B, we're essentially given the input, and we want to find the output that it gives us. So f of 2, so I go to my input of 2 on my table, and then I go down and I figure out what its matching output is. So f of 2 would give me 6. F of 4, I go over to my input of 4. What is its matching output? 3. In C and D, it's kind of backwards, where we're now given the output and we want to figure out what the input was. So if our output is 5, I look at my output row. So my output of 5 is here, which gave me an input of 0. So the input that gave me 5 was 0. And then what input gives me 2? So where's my output of 2? My output of 2 is back here. And so echo. And so the input that gives me that output of 2 was 8. And now we're asked whether or not this is actually a function. So this is a relation. Essentially, again, any data set I give you is a relation no matter what. But is this a function? So does every input only have one output? Well, if I look, all of my inputs only appear once. Like they never appear more than once, and they only go to one thing. So yes, this is a function. Change color. And each input has exactly one output. So that would be a function. Sorry, something weird popped up on my screen. All right, now I do want to go a little bit further with this. So say I tacked on an extra piece at the end, and it was for another x equals 0. If I tacked on another x equals 0 and say I said that it went to 5. Well, in the front, x equals 0 goes to 5, and back here, x equals 0 goes to 5. So it's a little silly to put it there again, but that would technically be fine because that's the input going to the same exact output. So if it just lists it again, that it's a bit stupid, but it's fine. Whereas if I have an extra 0 at the back, but say instead it said it gave a value of 10, well, now I have 0 going to 5 and then 10 separately, and that's what would be bad, is if the same input went to 2 separate outputs. So it's not even necessarily about checking whether or not the inputs repeat, it's checking whether repeated inputs would go to the same or different things. So let me clean that up to go back to the original question. So let's go through one more. Cut it a tiny bit early, but why won't you scroll? There we go. You'll also want to be very comfortable with reading not only tables, but graphs. So here, if I want f of 4, so just refresher, your inputs are your horizontal and your outputs are your vertical. So if I want f of 4, I got to go over to my input of 4, up to my function. Where am I at? I'm at a y value of 2. And then if I want what input gives me an output of 0, well, where's my output of 0? Where's on this graph, where does it reach a y value of 0? It would reach it here. What input is that associated with? It's associated with an input of 2. Questions, concerns on that? All right. So yeah, the next one, actually, no, I forgot that it goes to that one instead. Anyway, we'll still cut it right there. We're a little bit early, but you know, first day, meh. So we'll pick this up on Wednesday. We will hopefully finish these notes and hopefully start 1-2. We might not get that far, but we'll see what happens. So a couple things to remind you of. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this. This is important. Now don't freak out. Let me explain first. You're going to have a quiz on Wednesday. It's not really going to be like an official quiz. It's probably going to be, I just want you to get used to the quiz setup. They're on Blackboard. I want you to be able to see how they're going to run. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to ask you like, hey, what name do you like to be called? And where are you from? And kind of silly questions like that, because I know I want to make sure, I know I'm probably not going to say your names very often, but I had someone last semester, Kyra, that I kept saying Kira and it was Kyra. And I felt real bad when I found out that I was saying it wrong. So I'll probably ask you, pronunciations of your name if it's different from what you think I would say. And then it's probably going to have a few diagnostic questions. What I mean by that is it'll be a couple questions that are kind of covered throughout chapter 1, so I can kind of get an idea of where you guys are at. The quiz will be essentially, if you take it, you get the credit for it. Like it's not going to be graded on correctness. It's going to be graded on did you do it. That's the only one that will be graded that way. The usual quizzes are graded by correctness. But this first one, I'm not meaning to be any kind of official thing or anything like that. I just want to kind of get a feel for where you guys are at. So that'll happen on Wednesday during the last 15 minutes of class. Otherwise, I think I've said everything I want to say. Oh, maybe I'll say this real quick. I have a class directly before yours. So if for some reason you're trying to get in touch with me right before class, I might not see your email because I have a class right before this one and then I'm, grabbing a quick snack before this one or something. So I might not see your email if you try to email me right before class. If you want to try to like chat me in Teams right before class, I would probably see that more than I would an email. But other than that, anyway, I think I'm going to stop talking now. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around for a little bit. I can chill out for a little bit. Otherwise, have a great day. I'll see you all on Wednesday. Yeah. You're welcome.